Hey everyone, and welcome as we continue our study through the book of Acts, looking at the New Testament church and the establishment of the church. We're again, if you're just joining us or if this is your first time seeing one of these videos, we are doing a study through the entire New Testament. We started last year with a study called the 250 Events in the Life of Jesus, where we looked at the four Gospels and studied the life of Jesus. And now we've transitioned this year into studying the church. So there's a bunch of studies in our YouTube channel stuff that you can look at, and if you want to continue to get these, you can subscribe to our channel and get these. And so where we're at in here, if you watched yesterday's video, if not, I'd recommend you go back and look at it. We looked at the case of what happened with Ananias and Sapphira, and when they lied to lying to God essentially, sorry, about how much money they had received for a field and the consequences of lying for God here. And so now we're going to transition today and look at the apostles healing many people. And again, this is just a couple short verses, and so this one should be a little bit shorter. So today's reading and looking at it is Acts 5, verses 12 through 16. And it says, the apostles were performing many miraculous signs and wonders among the people, and all the believers were meeting regularly at the temple in the area known as Solomon's Colonnade. But excuse me, but not one else dared to join them, even though all the people had high regard for them. Yet more and more people believed were brought to the Lord, crowds of both men and women. As a result of the apostles' work, sick people were brought onto the streets on beds and mats, so that Peter's shadow might fall across some of them as they went by. Crowds came from the villages around Jerusalem, bringing their sick and their possessed by evil spirits, and they were all healed. And so, looking at this, looking at what we see here, and if you've been studying along with us so far, undaunted by their previous arrest at the temple in chapter 4 that we saw, the apostles continued to perform signs and wonders among the people and that they encountered here at the part of the temple. And so, and what's similar to this is, as in Jesus' ministry, the apostles' preaching was accomplished by many miraculous signs and wonders. That was the same thing that Jesus did, including convincing work, of healing and exorcism and things like that. And so, one of the things we see in here, if I go back to this in this section, it says no one else dared to join them, even though all the people had high regard for them. And so there's some debate in amongst different scholars on exactly what that this meant, exactly what who was they, who were the theys. And so there's four little scenarios that I'll play out here, and then I'll tell you where I fall into this. And again, I think this is one of the things that doesn't really matter, but it helps, I think, under a little bit of understanding the early church. And so some take them to be the whole church, and in verse 13, and understand they in verse 12 as them referring to the believers. Others understand them to be the apostles in verse 13, understand they in verse 12 to refer to the apostles as well. And the thing with the Greek in this is the Greek grammar allows for really either interpretation. So it's not 100% clear. The first interpretation would show that the unbelievers were afraid to attach themselves to the church unless they were truly converted. Now, the second interpretation would show that the unique authority and miraculous powers of the apostles. Now, again, this can go both ways. I think the Bible already implies the miraculous power of the apostles, and since this was happened right after the writing of Ananias and Sapphira, I lean more towards the first interpretation, meaning that the unbelievers were now afraid to show themselves or attach themselves to the church unless they were truly converted. I think that's where I lean. Again, it doesn't really matter in the scheme of things. But what we see here is it seems that the prior incident with Ananias and Sapphira, many non-believers that had attached themselves to the Christian group because of signs and wonders, that was no longer the case, right? They were no longer doing that. But even because they were doing that, even though they were no longer doing that, the genuine believers were still joining them. And so I think I feel that's where this is kind of leading to a little bit. Maybe I'm wrong. I mean, this, again, there's scholars a lot more educated than me that fall in both. Well, they fall with me and they fall on both sides of this. And again, I think personal preference probably, but I like the idea of, because we see this sometimes in the church, right? People who will attach themselves to a church because it's beneficial for them, right? It's they get food out of it, they get whatever out of it. There's the church takes care of them or whatever. They may not truly believe, but they're doing it because, well, the church. Now, what they saw with Ananias and Sapphira scared them, and so it's like, hey, now only true believers are doing this. And so this paradox here shows that the church's growth is not superficial, but comes from those who weigh the cost and are truly committed. And that's one of the things I think we have to be careful with in the church. I've seen so many times where, in the spirit of just trying to convert people, or I'm sorry, maybe I should say this, in the spirit of just trying to grow the church, right? And have the big numbers and have the, you know, the, well, look at us, look how wonderful we are, look how much we're growing type thing. That I've seen that happen in the past where people will do that, and they don't, when they're converting people or bringing people in, it's all, look how wonderful, oh, we'll take care of you, we'll do this, we'll do this, we'll do this, and which is all good. We, as a church, we should be doing that, but we don't talk about the cost of becoming Christians, right? Jesus did that. Jesus was honestly probably leaned more towards the harder side of, he is basically, he told him you had to carry a cross. If you're going to join with him, you're going to have to carry a cross, meaning basically this is going to be hard and you're going to have to be willing to die. And so many times as a church we will show all these wonderful things. Look how great this is going to be, look how wonderful this is going to be, but we don't talk about the hard part of being a Christian, and the sacrifice and the commitment that it takes to being a Christian. Now I'm not saying we don't talk about that. There are many wonderful things about being a Christian, but we can't just do one, right? And I think sometimes that's why you see, a lot of times you'll see like a quick growth or a thing, and then all of a sudden it just kind of falls apart. And I think a lot of that, sometimes that slow, steady increase of committed followers is much better than just trying to I don't want to say put on a show, but just try to just attract as many people as you possibly can until you have numbers. And there's a difference. And so I think the apostles knew the importance of not doing that. I think they knew the importance of having true committed believers, and that's, we see that yesterday in yesterday's reading with Ananias and Sapphira. They took this is very serious. This is very hard, and it's not something to take lightly, and it shouldn't be something you're just here because it benefits you. It's something that should be sacrificial. And so the pruning the bad growth, right? There was a pruning process sometimes that happened, but if you work in agriculture, you know that by pruning something, it actually produces new good growth. And you guys should read that about that in John 15. It's talked about there. And so the people came to believe in this, right? And so, sorry, transitioning from that real quick, just looking at this, I want to finish that thought on the church, and we need to make sure that we are truly grown. Not to say we dismiss people or we don't help people, right? Because that's what we're supposed to do. But we do have to make sure that those who come to the church and have an understanding of, hey, this is just not, oh, look, you're going to get a lot out of this. This is, there's sacrifice here. This is hard. This isn't easy, and it's not just for your benefit. And so I think we need to understand that. And so with Peter and the apostles healing people, there came to be this belief that there was something magical about Peter, right? Obviously, in that day and age, I can understand that, and that even his shadow could heal them. And we see this actually in a great number of the new places, in the New Testament, including Acts, where God healed people through surprising means, right? Besides Peter's shadow, we saw where people were healed by Jesus's robe, as well as face cloths and aprons that the apostle Paul touched. We're going to see this in Acts 19. But if you remember in our study last time, when Jesus, right, the lady just touched his robe. All she had to do was touch his robe, and she was healed. And so we know that there's nothing magical about these things. It was these people's faith really that are helping to heal him. But it was, of course, it wasn't just those things. It was actually the power of God working through the messengers with whom the objects were associated. So we know that it wasn't the robe that was magical. Peter's shadow is not magical. It is God working through these things to show himself to these people who have faith that they can be healed. And so Jesus, or God in this instance, is working through these people to make sure this happens. So again, we see this parallels what similar to Jesus's ministry. When he first started out, he started going out and healing people, healing the sick, the demon possessed. And this is what the apostles started doing as they went out. They were healing people, doing these same things as they were trying to grow the church and spread the message of Christ. So that was one of the big things that helped make it grow. And we see that, and we're going to continue to see that as we go through. And so now, starting tomorrow, we're going to see the church is going to start meeting some opposition, and we're going to look at that and dive into, we've seen the growth part, we've seen everything's kind of been for the most part pretty good. We've seen it, had the incident with Ananias and Sapphira, but now the church is really going to start coming under some persecution. So I hope everyone has enjoyed these. I hope these are helpful, and I hope you're learning from them. As always, I appreciate everyone who takes the time to listen to these, and I hope again you're learning from them. And if as always, I appreciate everyone for watching. And if you could share these, help spread the message, help get this out to other people. As always, thank you.